Here's a childhood favorite of mine, Hong Kong Borscht. I had hinted that I'd been working on this recipe and video a couple of weeks ago on my stories, and some of y'all had been bugging me in the comments ever since that day, asking when this video was gonna be ready. Well, here it is, and I gotta be honest, I'm really excited that some of y'all are excited. It's had to have been one of the first nice days in Detroit of the spring, so I just kind of decided to document my walk there from my studio all the way up to Gratiot Central Market, where I buy all my meat, or I should say all my meat with the exception of lamb that I get from Barry & Sons across the street. This meat market is definitely one of my happy places. Something about all the hubbub and chaos that just kind of like reminds me of a universal market atmosphere. I'm reminded of Detroit, I'm reminded of Hong Kong at the same time. I love it here so much. Another thing that I had promised that I would use more often was my pressure cooker. I vastly underestimated how many of you guys had Instapots and foodies, so I'm gonna do more of these in the future. Anyways, let's get started. You'll need some stewing meat, some oxtails, both large ones and small ones. If you had to choose between the two, I would just get small ones though. I would recommend using beef stock, and if you made superior stock with me in my last video, that works great too. Celery and carrots, making sure you buy extra carrots for yourself and your dogs to snack on. Not sure if you guys know my little dog. This one is Hugo. He's 11 years old, and he is a manifestation of my anxiety. Waxy potatoes like red ones hold better in soup. Tomato paste, black pepper, garlic powder, cumin, sweet paprika for color, and smoked paprika for flavor. Bay leaf, whether or not you think it's doing anything, I am just kidding. Bay leaf should have a smell. If yours doesn't smell, it's old and you should get new ones. My own little addition to this classic recipe, some ground chipotle because it's delicious. 2 onions. Just kidding, 1 onion. And any cabbage you might have lying around. My buddy Adam gifted me this tub of Wagyu tallow, which I don't think tastes better than regular tallow, but you know what tastes better than both of them? Free tallow. So we're gonna use it to sear our stewing meat, which makes it taste even beefier than it already is. While that is searing, we're gonna rough chop all our vegetables. Keeping in mind, because it's all going in a pressure cooker, I would keep the pieces a little larger so they don't get too soft. That's one of the downfalls with cooking everything in the same pot. You don't really get to choose when things go in, so no matter what's gonna happen, the vegetables are going to be pretty soft. I keep my carrots and potatoes on the bigger side for this reason. You want to use waxier potatoes like Redskins because they hold together a lot better when it comes to cooking long term in stew. If I could find medium-sized Redskin fingerlings, I would just try putting them in whole and see if they hold better up that way. Now that our stewing meat is adequately seared, there is nothing else to do except to season them and snack on them periodically over the rest of the day. Now I know the whole point of having an Instapot or a Ninja Foodie is to have something that you can kind of just set and forget. So consider this next step completely optional, but I can't help it. I always gotta blanch my oxtails in some anise seed. I just really like it when the anise flavor kind of like seeps into the bones of the oxtail so that when you're like sucking on them, they just like release this sweet aroma. As you can see from the scum that is floating to the top of the water in the pot, what this also does is that it releases the proteins from the oxtails that would otherwise cloudy your broth. Like I said, these are proteins, they're not impurities of any kind, they're perfectly safe to eat, they're just not very pretty to look at. You could actually do this step first while you're cutting your vegetables and searing your beef. I was just very inefficient with the way that I ordered this, but you should do this for 45 minutes if you want to do it. After all this is done, now just comes the easy part of throwing it all together. You could see from searing the stewing meat, there's some fond at the bottom. We're going to use that. Fond is pretty much the juices from the beef that have caramelized onto the bottom of the pot. They're full of flavor. We'll release those by putting the tomatoes and the onions in first and then letting those sear and get sweet on their own. The tomatoes will release water, which will mix in and loosen up the fond. As you can see, I am putting this Ninja Foodie absolutely through it by overfilling it with way too much of everything. I am not used to cooking for just 2 people. That is something that I'm working on. Throw in all your spices. As you can see, I'm being meticulous with my measurement, as well as the 1 can of tomato paste and the beef broth, and you're just gonna use enough broth to fill it up to the line. There's a line somewhere that says don't fill past here. I have filled past there. Close your pressure cooker, which I now realize has the same shape as the head of a Sentinel from X-Men the Animated Series, and pressure cook on high for at least 1 hour. Now for today's side quest, we are building off the main dish that we made in the last video, the Lionshead meatballs made of lamb. I have always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to see whether or not it made sense to make a spaghetti and Chinese meatball. It's the whole reason why I made a Lionshead meatball out of lamb in the first place, because I knew eventually I was going to cook some in marinara. Starting off with 1 can of San Marzano tomatoes as well as 1 can of San Marzano tomatoes worth of water. That was quite possibly the worst way to give that direction, but we're gonna keep it moving. Crush the tomatoes with your bare hands as if they were the hearts of your enemies. This visualization is made easier if all of your enemies just happen to be Italian. 2 to 3 cloves of garlic is really all you need for this recipe, which means to some of you, you're gonna use 6 to 8. I'm not gonna stop you. Did you know the pungency and aroma of garlic is actually a defense mechanism? It actually becomes more flavorful as a reaction to trauma, which if you ask any of your artist friends is something that they can absolutely relate to. Here you can actually see in real time what oil looks like when it's ready to be used for cooking. In a lot of directions you'll see like heat up oil till it starts to shimmer. This is actually that effect that they're looking for. Once it looks like this, you can put your food in it. Now to the garlic, I'm gonna add just one unique touch. Instead of chili flakes and salt, I'm gonna add blanching, which is a fermented broad bean paste and a foundational ingredient in Szechuanese cooking. It's salty, umami, and spicy, and in my mind would have been the perfect accompaniment to the tomatoes for a marinara. Giving everything a little mix now and then pouring in the crushed tomatoes and water into the pan. You want to use a wide frying pan for this simply because we want all of that extra water to cook and evaporate out, and that concentrates the flavor. Let all of this simmer with some fresh basil and some oregano. And of course, this is the part where I will also add my Lionshead meatballs. I'm gonna let the lamb's meat poach in with this sauce, thinking that they will impart flavors to each other. This is also one of the reasons why you don't want to use a saucepan to cook marinara. First of all, you want the frying pan to allow as much evaporation as quickly as possible, plus you want some space to be able to toss in the meatballs as well as the noodles when they're done. Because the meatballs are thoroughly mixed in with tofu, they never truly get hard even though they're being cooked for a second time. Reducing this sauce probably took anywhere around 20 to 30 minutes. Even after being cooked for a second time, the meatballs were still so tender. This was such a good dish. I love this so much. While obviously having its roots in Italian food, spaghetti and meatballs itself is actually a quintessential New York Italian dish. After coming to the United States, Italian immigrants had more access to meat than they did back in their home country. Last thing you gotta do is just boil some spaghetti until it's al dente and then just mix it in really well with the simmering sauce, and then you're good to go. As a person who cooks Chinese American food, I see Italian American food almost as kind of a kindred spirit, where we developed our own culinary styles that are heavily based on a home country influence, but it is, at the end of the day, very much our own. Italian American food is such an important part of America's culinary history, and it is a culinary gem. It's delicious, it's comforting. I don't understand how people can look down on it. I've changed my shirt and that means the stew is ready. I released the pressure valve as soon as the hour timer went off. I think it could have benefited from allowing itself to depressurize naturally. I don't know how long that would take. All I know is that the oxtails, especially the larger oxtails, while they were steaky and tender, were not fall off the bone, which is what a lot of people want. It was just that the smell was so strong throughout my house that I just couldn't wait another minute. I had to just get in there and try and see what it tasted like. It had been since I was a kid since I had this dish. And this dish actually has a really interesting history. Hong Kong Borscht was invented from Russian exiles that came into Shanghai through the 20s and 30s. Because beets were not at all very common in China at the time, the Russian chefs used red cabbage, oxtail, and tomatoes in place of it. Even though the Russians had settled in Shanghai, further unrest within China would force them to move to Hong Kong, bringing this special borscht with them. So now in every classic Hong Kong style cafe, you will see this stew for sale. Because these dishes are totally like classic and old school, they're probably being seen less and less as offerings in restaurants around Hong Kong. And this wouldn't exactly be something you would see somebody cook in their home very often. It takes at least 5 hours without an instapot to cook down the oxtails to a manageable level of tenderness. And yeah, I totally agree, 5 hours is way too long for someone to be spending at home watching over their stove. That's why I'm pretty happy to report that this in the Instapot works perfectly well. You can set it in the morning, forget it, let it depressurize on its own, and come home to a ready, hot, and beautiful bowl of Hong Kong style borscht.